So I've had a thought that I've wanted to share for a while, kind of record or figure out a way to keep. And I was talking with Brenna tonight and decided that I think I'm going to use YouTube as kind of a little bit of a journal in this way. I don't think it really fits Instagram or saving on Marco Polo in a family stream or whatnot. Anyway, the thought that's been on my mind, it's a simple thing that I ran into while studying. And this year I have been studying the Book of Mormon. I've been reading the Book of Mormon in Portuguese again. It's been a while in my mission Book of Mormon, which has been really fun. I've had the goal to just read the Book of Mormon every day this year, regardless of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and it's been awesome. It's been way easier to, as I've done that every day, it's been way easier to choose that over other things in the morning or in the evening and just make that time. Anyway, so that's been awesome. And things stick out differently too. In Portuguese, sometimes a word will be said differently, or just a word that has a different sentiment to it will give some different meaning to a verse. And the verse that I wanted to, that really reading it in Portuguese brought me to and kind of opened my eyes to a different way to see it, or maybe it was just this time that I read it, but in 1 Nephi 15 verse 5, for context, Nephi has just, all the brothers have heard Lehi's dream, and Nephi has this experience with an angel where he's seen the dream and heard the interpretations and seen his brother's iniquity, and after he has seen this vision, he walks to his father's tent, and the first thing he sees is his brothers arguing. He walks in and they're arguing, and he's like, what are you guys, yeah, they were disputing one with another. Anyway, so chapter 15, he walks back and sees them fighting. And this is what he says. He says, he tells them they need to ask God to learn these things. And then he says this, and it came to pass in verse 5, that I was overcome because of my afflictions. For I considered that mine afflictions were great above all, because of the destruction of my people, for I had beheld their fall. And then in Portuguese, it says, I mean, obviously the same thing, but it says, instead of saying I considered mine afflictions, that mine afflictions were great above all, it says it a little bit differently. It just says, I considered that my afflictions were greater than all others. Same thing, but it just felt different reading it in Portuguese, and it stuck out to me, just realizing that here's Nephi. He's got a blessed life, he's got the gospel, they have the plates, they've left, they've been saved. He could sit and talk about all the many blessings, but in this moment, he is feeling like, so he's overcome. He's overcome because of his afflictions. And I don't think I ever remember realizing that or thinking about Nephi that way. Maybe because in my life I've reached a point where I've can empathize with that more, feeling overcome. But anyway, Nephi was overcome. And then the next part, he says, I felt like my afflictions were as bad as they could be. They were worse than anything else. And I certainly had never imagined Nephi in that scenario, like feeling like, oh my gosh, there is nothing worse than this. There could be nothing worse. I considered my afflictions greater than all, worse than all others. And I think that just stuck out to me because we all have moments where our afflictions feel worse than everything else. Like, this couldn't be worse, and we just feel like, could it get any worse? It can't. And the reality is that it always could, and there are always blessings that we can look back at, and that's great, and we should try and do that. But it just was eye-opening to me that someone I look up to and love reading about and love his stories, Nephi, had that moment of being totally overwhelmed and feeling like he was in the worst afflictions there could be. And in reality, it was just because of what was to come. It wasn't even anything that he was experiencing right then. It was that he had learned that in the future, his posterity would go through those hard times and eventually be destroyed and leave the gospel and leave the Lord. And his current circumstances were just fine. It was even just worry about the future that made him feel like nothing could be worse. And then walking to his father's tent and his brothers are arguing, and it's like, oh, this is it. This is the beginning of it all. This is how they're going to be. They're not going to change. So anyway, just something that stuck out to me, and realizing the best of the best of the best, Nephi, had his day where nothing could be worse. And he was overcome by his afflictions. So we all go through it, even the best of the best of the best. And we know how Nephi was blessed and got through it, and grateful to him for the stories that are recorded and his faith. And anyway, just wanted to share that insight and reflection.